17 years, former Deputy PM Tim Fischer held the seat of Farrer for the Nationals. There's optimism within the party that former Army Colonel Brad Robertson might just be the candidate to win it back.
Well, Brad, you know, I've seen a lot of candidates in my time, but you on paper and to meet you in person, you're an exceptional candidate. What made you put your hand up for a 3-cornered, 4-cornered, 5-cornered contest? I mean, this will be a fight for the seat of Farrer.
I wanted to support my community. I got involved in a number of organisations for personal reasons, in non-for-profit sector, homeless veterans, the local hospital, local manufacturing. I chair a number of organisations for that. And I just grew very much attracted to continuing to serve and look after my community.
Yeah, because you and your wife Kate grew up in the country.
We did, yes. My wife at Boggabri, just north of Gunnedah, and myself in Bathurst. And we fell in love with this as soon as we landed here because we'd been in Saudi Arabia for 2 years as the defence attaché. We came here and then my wife and I walked down this main street and people said hello, they smiled at you. You walked into a shop and they knew you by name the second time you went there. And we just felt really like this was where we belonged.
Well, I reckon your polling's pretty good because I'm looking around the room at all the call flutes here and you're talking about water, you're talking about health and hospitals in this area. They are all the things that people have been raising with me. Just on water, it's a real issue in this campaign and there's a difference between what some are promising, which sounds like more water, but it's more water for the environment, and it's what farmers are telling me, it is that we need more water or more security of water so that we can do and all the things we do, and we can grow and we can feed Australia. How's that a problem in the campaign?
Well, look, I think there's two tests on water at this election. The first is, are you going to oppose the Labor Party's buyback approach? When we were in government, we put in a law which stopped water buybacks. In fact, I helped write that law when I worked for somebody called Barnaby Joyce. He did that as part of a team. Then the Labor Party got in a few years ago and they've scrapped that law, and they scrapped that law with the support of Teal members of Parliament. Teal members of Parliament like David Pocock, who next week will be here with the so-called independent candidate who is working with Teals already. Even before she's in Parliament, she's working with Teals. And so the real question for her is, if she is running around with Teals, if she's funded by the same people who funded the Teals, what is she really going to do to stop those water buybacks? David Pocock voted in the Parliament to take back more water from these communities.
I know that is absolutely right on the Pocock point, but she's sort of dodging her way through it. I think she's realised water's a bit of an issue, because I noticed on the road a lot of billboards saying, I want a Royal Commission into water. What do you think of a Royal Commission, her idea of a Royal Commission into water?
The problem for farmers is, if you have a Royal Commission right now, when you've got a Labor government who has form in not actually supporting farmers with water, they set the conditions, they set the terms of reference, they determine who runs it. The potential is that they'll get a worse outcome. There will be more focus on the environment than there is on farming and farming outputs. It's a double-edged sword there. You want an inquiry, but you could actually end up with a worse situation.
Do you think people understand that she is a Teal insofar as her environmental policies and you know, I talk to farmers and they're drowning in green tape. A lot of that comes from the left side of politics.
Oh, there's no doubt these Teals are very tricky. They're very tricky at trying to hide their real agenda. I do think people are starting to wake up to that here. What I've heard on the crowd here is that at the last federal election, there wasn't perhaps the understanding about who backs Michelle, who's supporting her, why she has so many advertising and people around her. Since the last federal election, all the disclosures have come out, and those funding disclosures show that she is funded by the same people who put Zali Steggall into Parliament, who put all these Teals into Parliament, who not only want to take all the water away from this area, but they also want to impose massive amounts of green net zero regulations on farmers, on rural communities. And that's another thing we've heard going around, is that this net zero agenda just means a whole lot more red tape for people who want to grow our food. They're losing their farming country to these ridiculous carbon credits.
Water to one side, the other big issue dominating the campaign is health services and the fate of the current Albury Hospital, to upgrade it or build a completely new one.
My wife got sick during COVID. I was in Melbourne with the COVID task force in the military, and my wife was diagnosed with cancer, and she...
Wow, what a tough time to have that come through.
It was, and the services weren't available here.
Yeah.
Not that she needed for her particular cancer, so she was moved to Sydney. Most people don't realise when a person has cancer and they go through that process or cancer journey, there's a lot of other complications that start to appear. A lot of the treatments make other things worse. And there was one occasion where my wife, after the cancer and the cancer treatment, got very sick. And I remember my wife being put into an ambulance by my son. Sorry.
No.
Yep. And
You're allowed to be human.
yeah. And then she was flown by the Royal Flying Doctor Service to Sydney because of the potential. She had numerous complications. And what my thoughts were back to my military times. I looked at this circumstance of my wife having to travel hours for when minutes mattered. And for me, that really brought it home that country and regional and rural and remote areas have, for generations, been asked to just accept the fact that their health system or their treatments will be hours away from where they are. And for me, it became a passion. And talking to the surgeons, the doctors, the nurses, over the last couple of years, working with them, they're passionate about this region. They are doing an absolutely fantastic job. They're the ones who are complaining. They're the ones who did a clinical services plan in 2021. They discussed it with the government. The government came up with what needed to be done here. What they've done is from a lot of the community's perspective, band-aid solution that under a budgetary constraint that won't meet the requirements of today. And
So you're confident if you get elected to Canberra that you can help pull together a solution that's a fair income solution, not a band-aid solution, as you say, for the people of this region?
well, I think I can. I've actually sat down with all of these local experts, going through those plans and identifying what needs to be here. And I've worked with the team, the Nationals team, to work through what could be achieved through a coalition government here locally to address not only Albury but the wider region.
Can I just add to that too, Peter, that I've been through lots of campaigns where local people understandably have a good idea about how to fix things, but often those ideas don't come with a lot of the details about the costings and how it's all going to work. What's blowing me away with Brad is that just in a few weeks, in fact the first day I had out of Canberra as leader, he had massive amounts of documents with all of this detail ready to go. They were presented in a way which was almost of cabinet submission sort of quality.
It's interesting, when I asked people how they were going to vote, I got all, manner of the spectrum, but almost everyone universally, Matt, said how disappointed they were in the Prime Minister's lack of leadership. And it wasn't an anger or an aggression, it was that they felt incredibly let down at a time, and some even referenced Bondi, but at a time of crisis on fuel, they just don't think he's across the brief, and they just don't think he's up to the job.
Well, people are confused. That's the reaction I've got. People are very confused about what it actually is the situation in this country. A number of people have raised with me the national address that we were all told was going to be extremely significant, and then within days the energy minister's running around saying, no, we've got plenty of fuel and you can all keep...
But we're about to spend $20 million on an ad campaign.
Yeah, now we're going to have an ad campaign. Why don't we spend money on drilling for oil again in our own country? Why is the Prime Minister travelling all the way to Singapore to beg for more oil coming from there when he won't meet with the Queensland Premier, who wants to actually produce domestic oil? So the Prime Minister is now, and the government is now subsidising. They're subsidising the production of foreign oil in places like Singapore, because they're going to use our balance sheet to bring in fuel to the country, produced overseas. But this government will do nothing at the moment, not lift a finger, to help produce more oil in Australia, which would mean Australian jobs, Australian investment, and of course Australian fuel security long term, much more than relying on sea lanes bringing in fuel to our country. So you've got to draw the conclusion here this government is not really about Australia.
Country people are pretty shrewd, they're polite, very polite about the Prime Minister, but disappointed, but they're shrewd. Do you think they look at Michelle Milthorpe as a true independent?
Well, look, I think people have found out now that Michelle Milthorpe is really a teal in orange clothing. She has presented herself with these orange colours that they do in regional Australia, but that is hiding something. You don't have to scratch very hard at that veneer, and it's teal funders. It's the Climate 200 movement who are funding her. It's her friends, teals in the parliament, that she is campaigning around this electorate. And so I don't think Michelle's being upfront with the electorate here. It just seems, I think, people get that she's got something to hide.
I reckon she does have something to hide. Michelle Milthorpe was asked to come on the show for me to interview her, like I've interviewed the others, and of course tomorrow night David Farley, One Nation candidate, will join you, but she refused. She ducked and weaved, but eventually said no.